Alright guys, so we're going to start our intro into this unit, just going through the PowerPoint notes. So this is how hopefully most of your notes will go, or at least that's kind of what I'm thinking at the moment. I just feel like it'd be a little more complicated for you to have to like Google Meet in when I'm giving notes and have it up on your screen, like trying to fill in the blanks while they're trying to do it. So instead, I'm going to give you this PowerPoint at the end, so you'll have it to like look back on. But basically, I'm going to just kind of talk like I normally would, or mostly how I normally would, and just embed questions throughout it, and that'll kind of be your replacement grade, because like they have to actually fill in the blank notes, and they'll get a grade for that. You'll get a grade for doing these ed puzzles, so you are both having to watch the notes. Okay, so this week we're just going through the intro to forensic science, and basically like what is it, and then what are the top careers. So this is a career-based class, and we're going to go much deeper into each of these careers throughout the year, but basically we're going to do like a broad overview this week, because you are going to do a short career project on Thursday, picking one of these careers that I talk about that you're the most interested in. So as you go through these notes, pay attention also from the personality quiz that you took on Monday. It would be how you know kind of like which career you want to focus on. So this page, forensics is also called criminalistics. Both of them are true. Both of them are like, you could use the same word. They are the study of the application of science to matters of the law. So how can we help out the law to convict criminals using our application of science? So here's just all the different areas that are involved in forensic science. Like literally any realm of science would work for forensics. So if you're into chemistry, if you're more into earth science, if you're more into technology, if you are good at math, if you're more into biology, like literally all of them have a spot, and this kind of breaks down the job type. So like if you were good at biology, you could be a DNA analyst, you could work in entomology, which is with the insects. There's even forensics with botany, because sometimes on bodies we find remnants of plants that may have been from another location. Like if a body was moved, it might have pollen from a different location. That would tell us where the body came from, which could help us track down the killer. Now, this is the general job description, so obviously every job description is going to be a little different depending on the job title. Like if you're a blood spatter analyst, that's a lot different than a forensic entomologist. They do very different things, but this is like the general job description. So they all process and document crime scenes in some way. Not all of them actually go to crime scenes, but they all process evidence from it. They collect and preserve evidence. So again, the collect might be kind of a reach. They don't all go and collect it, but they definitely all have to preserve whatever evidence they are sent. They analyze and compare evidence in a laboratory. Now, some are in a lab more than others, but they all are going to compare evidence in some way. And they're basically the goal of any of the forensic careers is to basically reconstruct what you think happened in the crime based on the data you find, based on whatever kind of evidence you study in particular. Now, one of your vocab terms is going to be expert testimony. Pretty much all the forensic careers have to be able to give expert testimony. What that means is you're a person who's permitted to testify at a trial because you have special knowledge and proficiency in that particular field. So if you work your way up and you are good at your job, then you'll be the kind of person they're going to call in. If you have to write a report on that specific area of the crime scene, then they're going to want you to come in and talk and sound like you know what you're talking about, so that the people on the jury could understand why you're saying the evidence is leaning the way it is. And that would be giving expert testimony. So now I'm just going to kind of like really briefly go through the branches of science. Now, if you were in class with me, normally I show little quick videos of people either doing these jobs or that's kind of mostly like, it's like the actual people doing these jobs and kind of explaining a little bit of what they do, and they'll usually kind of walk you through a case. But I'll post those videos instead of showing them in here, because that'd be kind of weird in this recording. So like, see, I have these two videos of two pathologists. So what a pathologist does, they might also be called a medical examiner. So that's going to be the same job, a pathologist versus a medical examiner. Basically, they're going to be looking at the bodies after, like they're already deceased, so they're looking at deceased bodies and they're doing autopsies. So you cut open the body, you look through all of the body parts, and you try to figure out the cause and circumstances of death. So from looking at what you're finding, the wounds, what is wrong with the body that caused them to die. This is the highest paid job that I'm going to talk about, because they're a doctor. You have to have your doctorate. But that also means that this is the highest level of education job, generally. Odontology is basically a dentist that specializes in identifying corpses based on their teeth. So if a body is too decomposed to identify them, or they don't have a license on them, we can't find any other way to identify this person, sometimes you can identify them through dental records, and that'd be what an odontologist would do. We've also had some cases where bite mark analysis was used in the court case. So if a body was found to have a bite mark on it, we might use that to match it to the person we think committed the crime. It has been proven that bite mark analysis can be kind of faulty. Our teeth, especially this is not a good thing to imagine, but if you imagine a bite, if the person was struggling, that's going to move the teeth around, so it's not going to make a perfect print unless the person was being very still, which is kind of unlikely. So it's not a perfect process, but it is something that comes up. Most odontologists are dentists that, as a side gig, they are also good at doing this. So a lot of times you'll be a dentist and also do this. This is just a case that I usually bring up at this time because Ted Bundy is a very infamous serial killer, and he actually, his biggest piece of evidence in his case of how he was convicted was bite mark analysis. So like I said, it can be faulty. His bite mark, is this right here, was actually pretty clear because probably the person was already deceased when the bite mark was made, meaning that it was a pretty good imprint, and they matched it his teeth, and Ted Bundy just happens to have really distinct teeth. So if you had normal straight teeth, it'd be a little harder, but his actually had some pretty distinct crooked parts that matched just him. So that was the one time when odontology really did save the day, got him convicted. The next career is forensic toxicology, so that is for toxins, so poisons or drugs. Probably a big part of this person's job would be doing drug analysis. That'd be kind of what we test more for than poisoning deaths. Drug overdoses would be more normal. So a medical examiner might send over blood samples or urine samples, skin samples, whatever they needed for them to test for drugs, alcohol, poisons, whatever could be in the body that could cause death or be a part of the reason why they died. So most of their job, it's again pretty well paid. I would say you don't have to get your master's or doctorate. You could just get basically your bachelor's in some science field and then get trained in toxicology. The best one would be chemistry related to this one. Okay, next is forensic anthropology. So anthropology is the study of bones, so the identification of persons or personal characteristics based on body remains. So this would be after a body has pretty much fully decomposed or mostly decomposed. If that's when we find the deceased person, then you're going to have to call in a forensic anthropologist because that's going to be their specialty. This is another job that's going to take a pretty high level education before you could really do the job. If you just have your bachelor's or your master's degree, that's really not enough. Most of them are going to want you to have your doctorate before you could really get in and do the actual aspects of the career. Thank you. And then just to kind of show you one time that a case was used with anthropology was the John Wayne Gacy case. So he's the scary clown killer, if you've heard of him. Basically, people don't usually know him as much as Ted Bundy, but he's still a fairly famous serial killer. He killed about 35, I forget the exact number, young males, so teenager to early 20s was kind of the normal range for him of killing. And basically he would, like most of the top serial killers, he would rape and kill them. But kind of what was really stand out about John Wayne Gacy was he buried most of his victims under his house. And then he would cover the bodies with lime, which helped decompose the body. So when they finally find out that he's stashing bodies under his house, they finally catch this guy. Basically, he got caught because finally one of the kids that went missing had a parent that was just super pushy and actually remembered that the kid had seen John Wayne Gacy about a job. So she knew that he had went to go see him and then he went missing. Before that, they didn't really know. Most of the time, the kids that he picked were kind of homeless or already, they were just living with a friend. They weren't staying with parents who were really paying attention. So they catch them, they find the bodies, but at this point, they're really decomposed. And they're kind of all on top of each other in layers. And so basically an anthropologist had to come out and take out each body and try to match them all. It was a huge ordeal, and they actually still haven't found a match to all of the bodies that were under there. Some of them are still missing persons. But yeah, that was an anthropology case for sure, because he had just so many that were so decomposed. This is just a picture more up close of anthropology. I like to bring it up. My sister went to school for this. So why, like, again, it's a really cool job, but again, you have to have like your doctorate before you can really do it. She's still getting her master's. She does get to go out, and like this was a dig site that she went to. Like these are pictures that she took. She went to Romania with her college and did this cool dig site to dig up skeletons and wrote a report on it and all those things. So she gets to get part of it at this stage, but to really to get paid for it, you're gonna have to keep going to school for quite some time. Next up is serology. So forensic serology is identification of blood and other body fluids. So most of the time I think of blood with this, but it's any body fluid would be a serologist. So they can be, one side of it could be a DNA analyst. So they're taking a body fluid or blood and figuring out the DNA. So that'd be all working in a lab. They could be just doing blood type. Blood typing we'll do later in the year, and it's a really simple test to blood type someone. And then they could be doing the blood spatter. So if you're seeing this picture up here, like he's looking at the blood. Now that's a totally different sector. You're not usually going to do like all those types of job. You're going to like specialize in one. So you could be a blood spatter analyst or a DNA analyst, or you're just someone who helps, like a DNA tech, and you'll run blood tests and things like that. Then we have forensic entomology. And normally I would have showed you the video there, so again, I'll have to post those at another time. I'm trying to keep this video shorter. So forensic entomology is using insects to determine time of death. It's actually a pretty important job, and it's kind of gross. But if you can get past the ickiness of bugs, then it's a very cool job. It's actually very necessary. So if a body is more than like 2 or 3 days old, then there's already going to be insect activity. And that's going to be our best way at that point to calculate when that person died, is using the size of the insects. So if it's in a pretty decent like weather location where flies could get to the body, then maggots are going to be like the main insect that we'll be looking at, because maggots get there quickly, they grow quickly. You can take maggots back to the lab, measure how big they are, and as long as you know the species of fly, then you can calculate how long that maggot's been there. How long it's been there will tell you time of death, because flies get there around 24 hours after a person has died, or the eggs get there and hatch. So that would give you a more correct time of death than really any other method that we have if the body's already kind of decomposed. Okay, this was just a case. You can kind of look over it where that was important. Stepchildren went missing, and by studying the location of on the bodies where the blowflies had laid their eggs, it was determined that the children had likely been asphyxiated, that means suffocated. So the entomologist concluded that the egg-laying pattern would have been different had a bullet or knife wound been present. So like basically you can prove, because if there is a wound, then the maggots will go into the wound. If there's maggots only in like our orifices, like our eyes, nose, and mouth, which are like the normal places for them to go, then that means there is no wounds, because if there was, they would go there as well. It's just a gross picture that I took from the internet, so look away if it scares you. Alright, I think I'm going to pause there for this video, and I'll do more tomorrow.